We're going to dive straight into this one. Take a look at this graphic showing the teams in the top 5 leagues this season. The clubs in yellow are the ones that have minority or majority investment from private equity companies. 15 of them are yellow. If you look closely, you'll see that one of the leagues are yellow too. We'll get into that later. How on earth has this happened, and why are private equity companies rushing to get a slice of European football? More importantly, what impact does this have on our beautiful game, and how does this affect us, the fans? I'm Jordan, and today, along with research from Harry Bush, we're going to explore this from 3 different perspectives. The private equity companies themselves, our clubs, and I'll save us, the fans, to the very end. But first, it's worth understanding the private equity success stories. Does it work? Well, I've got 2 private equity exits for you. In 2014, KKR took a 9.7% stake in German club Hertha Berlin for 61 million euros. Over the next 3 years, they increased their stake to just under 37%. They steadied the ship, Hertha Berlin got better, and in 2018, the club bought back KKR's stake for a modest profit for the private equity company. More recently, and in the same year, Elliott took over AC Milan after Chinese entrepreneur owner Lee Yong-hong missed a payment of 300 million euros. That was a crazy story. They too steadied the ship. AC Milan won the league a few years later. And then Redbird came and bought AC Milan for 1.2 billion euros in 2022, just 4 years later. Yes, that is a 4x profit in just 4 years. A sizable return for Elliott. You see, this is what private equity houses do. Typically speaking, they buy distressed assets, streamline them operationally and financially, implement a culture of growth, and then sell them for a healthy profit, usually in a target timeframe of 5 to 7 years. And with European football, as you're about to see, there is a healthy amount of opportunity for them to do that. I write about things like this every week. It's delivered to your inbox every Monday at 11 AM UK time. There are hundreds of you signed up to my newsletter right now. To join them, click on the link in my description or scan this QR code. Now, why are private equity companies crawling all over Europe? Well, firstly, in 2020, there were a lot of distressed assets. It's almost like something happened in the world that year that made a lot of clubs start to struggle. A lot of clubs were in tatters, and many clubs are still today reeling from the decisions made 4 years ago in that year. Private equity companies were watching and swirling like vultures. Many of them pounced. They were taking advantage of clubs in dire need of some capital. On top of that comes the growth potential. If you think about it, broadcast rights have been going up and to the right for many years now, when the prominent source of income for football clubs has been growing so aggressively and so consistently, it makes for an attractive proposition for many private equity companies. Thirdly though, and in my opinion more importantly, European football assets are cheap and they have little regulation. The NFL banned private equity participation in ownership for decades until last month. And even though they finally let private equity companies invest in NFL teams, there's still a lot of rules around them. Look at this graphic on the right hand side to see some of the rules. The interesting one there, the max amount that they can invest in a team is 10%. In European football, however, there are less rules. There's also a lot of flexibility in the types of deals that they can do. You can invest in clubs. FSG own the majority of Liverpool, for example, whereas Ares own 34% of Atletico Madrid. You can invest in leagues. CVC invested 1.9 billion euros in La Liga. This got them a board seat and it gave them 8.25% share of a company that manages the revenues of La Liga. Pretty innovative. But you can also invest in revenue streams too. Check this. 6th Street have purchased 25% of Barcelona's revenues for their broadcasting rights in Spain for the next 25 years. In the 2020 to 2021 season, Barcelona received 165 million euros in payment for the domestic broadcast rights that year. Based on those numbers, if that level was to stay the same for the next 25 years, it will probably increase, but for the purpose of this, they'll stay the same. 6th Street will make $40 million annually from the deal. Over 25 years, that will equate to just over €1 billion. For this investment, they've given Barcelona 527 million euros. They're going to almost double their money, and all they have to do is sit back and wait for Barcelona to get paid. Pretty good, huh? So now you know why private equity firms get involved. But how do the clubs benefit? Well, again, there are some pretty notable reasons. The first being, they need the money. I mentioned earlier that private equity companies like buying distressed assets. And around 2020, there were a lot of distressed assets. Let's take Atletico Madrid. Between 2010 and 2020, Atletico Madrid became a force in Spanish football. They rose from being a mid-table club to being one of the best 3 teams in Spain and one of the best teams in Europe. But despite this, a report came out a few years ago which suggested that club debt had reached astronomical levels. They needed private equity to steady the ship, and provide some much needed capital to reduce that net debt amount. There just simply aren't that many financial institutions out there that have such deep pockets available so quickly. La Liga president Javier Tebas has echoed those sentiments too. In a recent interview, he said that 90% of clubs would not have had the resources to continue without that investment into the league from CVC. The good thing is, La Liga structured that deal well. Half of the money that was received from CVC got distributed evenly to all La Liga clubs. There was a mandate that a proportion of that money must be spent on club infrastructure. As a result, we've seen some improvements. Villarreal have a new stadium. Real Sociedad have a new training facility. This helps clubs make more money. This helps clubs attract more talent. Clubs simply would not have been able to do this without the injection of capital from these private equity companies. PE companies are also known for their proficiency in strategic management and administration, and they develop this from all of their investments in many different industries around the world. Liverpool are an excellent example of this. They were going nowhere under Hicks and Gillette. Little on the pitch success. Rifts behind the scenes. There were even some rumours that Liverpool were going to go into administration at one point. I remember that time. On top of that, in my last video, I got an excellent comment from Delboy0, who, as a Liverpool fan, remembers how they were across the 1980s into the early 2010s. He said, and I'll paraphrase, in the 1980s, Liverpool were the biggest club in England. The Premier League was created in 1992, and this exploded the Premier League across the world, with many people globally interested in English football. Liverpool, however, rejected the global ideology and fell behind relative to clubs like Manchester United in the same time. Liverpool didn't go on global pre-season tours. Rick Parry, the chairman, didn't adopt the global nature of football at that time. And a delta was driven between United and Liverpool. However, FSG came in 2010. Some strategic decision-making came shortly after. The global nature of Liverpool massively improved. Better management decisions, and success followed shortly after. Fenway Sports Group are backed by Arctos Partners and Redbird Capital. There's a lot of private equity influence there, and the results in the last 15 years speak for themselves. And that is how fans benefit. More money into a club brings stability. With stability, good decision-making should be downstream from there. If Barcelona had private equity investment sooner, maybe they might not have been such a financial pickle over the last 10 years. Maybe Messi might even still be at the club. Infrastructure improvements come with that too, and fans benefit from this big time. Silver Lake have invested $500 million in the City Football Group. Lo and behold, the Etihad is now set for a major stadium renovation that will take place very soon. By 2026, 7,000 extra fans will be able to watch Man City week in, week out at the Etihad. I mentioned the new Villarreal stadium earlier too. These things lead to success. Success isn't guaranteed, but it's important to remember that that is the aim. There is a perception out there that private equity companies invest in European football clubs, they don't know anything about football, and all they want is money. There is some truth to that. But money and profits are never bad for a company, nor are they bad for a football club. What's interesting from here is where this trend goes in the future. My take is as follows. The latest round of broadcasting rights across Europe are great, but they've shown a slowdown in growth that we've seen in previous broadcast cycles. In France, it went backwards. With broadcast revenue being such a major income source for clubs, does the reduced growth potential make it less appealing for private equity companies? In addition, a lot of the private equity investments that happened around 2020 will come to a light around 2025, 2026, 2027. That's when they reach their target 5 to 7 year time frame. Will they look to exit those positions? When investing in traditional companies, that's always a target window. Does that match with football clubs? It's going to be fascinating to see what kind of deals they look to do to get out of their positions when that time comes. The final thing that intrigues me is the governance that private equity companies have on the game. CVC, for example, made a lot of money with Formula One. A big driver of the growth in Formula One was the introduction of cost caps. This made spending a lot more universal, linear, and easier to forecast for the Formula One teams. And in turn, this allowed a lot more growth for the business and for the teams themselves. A stronger imposition of them maybe might come into the game. Similarly, another thing that private equity loves in sport is closed leagues. With cost caps and closed leagues, asset values can really accelerate in price. There was an attempt of this with the Super League not too long ago. With the increasing presence of private equity in European football, will there be a Super League attempt again? Or will there be collusion in the private equity space to come together to try and influence this to ensure that this happens in another form, some other way? All remains to be seen, and I'm fascinated by it all. Shout out to Harry for helping me with the research here. For more info, subscribe to the newsletter. But to see a club taking on private capital, aiming for big success, click right here.